Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to really tackle one of the most persistent and frankly damaging myths in leadership. The myth of the unbreakable leader, the person who has to project total certainty, who can never show they're tired, always has the perfect plan.
Right. And that image, as, dominant as it is in our culture, is just completely incompatible with the world we actually live in.
It really is.
We're all operating in this environment of just relentless upheaval. You've got economic volatility, tech shocks, and just this deep emotional fatigue everywhere. That old model, it just snaps.
It snaps under the pressure. And the thing is, the pressure isn't letting up. So we dove into a stack of sources that suggest, effective leadership today isn't about avoiding the storm.
Yeah.
It's about learning how to walk straight through it with some kind of, grounded clarity. We're looking for something deeper than just toughness.
Exactly. And our sources offer this really transformational blueprint. It blends strategic resilience with deep self-awareness and, well, what we could call a kind of internal spiritual anchor.
Okay.
So we're trying to move the goalposts from just, reactive survival to real purposeful influence. And we've structured this around 4 pillars: internal grounding, emotional intelligence, adaptive flexibility, and purpose-driven action.
Let's start with that internal grounding, because for years, resilience was all about rigidity. Push harder, don't let them see you struggle.
Right.
But the sources are really clear that this just creates leaders who are hardened maybe, but also brittle. They're prone to collapse. True resilience isn't, forced positivity or just bottling up your emotions.
It's really the opposite of rigidity. And to get this, the sources go back to a foundational concept. It's a Greek term, hypomone.
Hypomone.
Yeah. We usually translate it as endurance or perseverance. But the literal meaning is to remain under. Hypo plus mone.
To remain under. Wow, that changes the whole image, doesn't it?
It does.
It shifts it from this frantic activity of bouncing back.
Exactly. It's not elastic. Think about a weightlifter. They're under this immense crushing load. They can't just bounce back quickly or they'll get seriously hurt.
Okay.
The power of hypomone is that capacity to hold the pressure, to stay steady under the weight without collapsing, and then through that stability, eventually press it upward.
So it's an act of stillness.
It's a muscular defiance that requires stillness, yes.
So if you're facing a huge crisis, say a market collapse, the question isn't, how do I make this go away?
Right.
It's more like, what discipline, what internal strength is this pressure trying to forge in me right now?
That's it. The crisis becomes the tool, not the enemy.
Yeah.
And it's a discipline, not a talent. It's built-in trouble. And this whole idea leads directly into what the sources call the most dangerous trap for leaders: the identity trap.
The identity trap. Okay, let's unpack that. It's also called role enmeshment.
Role enmeshment, yeah. It's basically the mistake of, mixing up who you are, your core identity, with what you do, your job title, your performance, your results.
So when the company's numbers dip, the leader feels like it's a personal failure. The sources call it an ontological death, which sounds pretty dramatic.
It is profound. It's not just embarrassment. It's a deep crisis of self. If your identity is the CEO and the company fails, then in your mind, you fail to exist.
And that would lead to defensiveness.
Total defensiveness, risk aversion, and inability to admit you were wrong, because admitting failure feels like admitting personal obliteration.
Which explains why so many leaders get rigid right when they need to be the most flexible. So how do you actually build this identity anchor? When you've got investors breathing down your neck, how do you anchor yourself in something other than the results?
The anchor has to be in purpose, not performance. If you are deeply anchored in your mission, your core values, you operate from security. That leader can look at a failed project and say, okay, that strategy didn't work, but my mission is intact. My ability to lead is intact.
They're secure enough to admit mistakes.
And pivot aggressively, because their self-worth isn't tied to being right all the time.
And that's security. That's what allows for real strategic movement. Which brings us to our next section. Clarity in a crisis. The sources here immediately go after what they call the idol of linearity.
Yes, that dangerous belief that success has to be a smooth graph, always going up and to the right.
Actually, it never is.
It never is. The sources show that major transformation often requires a shipwreck.
And the case study they use from Acts 27 is fascinating. You have Paul, who's a prisoner on a ship.
A prisoner, no positional authority.
None. And suddenly he's the one leading professional sailors through a hurricane, this northeaster.
And the crew is panicking. They're throwing cargo overboard, the ship's tackle. They're just desperately trying to save the vehicle.
The ship.
The ship. But Paul stands up and says something amazing. He says, "We will lose the ship, but we will save the mission." He accepts the loss, the economic loss, the operational loss, to save the purpose.
And that is the absolute key, isn't it? Distinguishing the vehicle from the vision.
Yes.
The vision is your why. The vehicle is just the how, this strategy, this product, this office.
And fragile leaders, they fall in love with the vehicle. They can't separate the strategy from the mission. When the strategy breaks, they quit.
But the steadfast leader, they have the courage to say, this vehicle is sinking. We have to let it go so the vision can survive.
It's an incredibly painful thing to do in the moment.
Oh, I can only imagine. A CEO who spent 5 years on a flagship product.
Yeah.
To have to kill it because the market shifted. That must feel like self-sabotage.
It does, unless you're anchored. If your identity is tied to that product's performance, you can't let it sink. But if you're anchored in the vision, you see it as just a necessary, painful evolution.
You're willing to lose something important to save something essential.
That's it.
Okay, that kind of courage. It has to come from a really well-regulated internal core. Which brings us to emotional regulation and recovery protocols. The sources say every leader will face a Ziklag moment.
Ziklag. It's from 1 Samuel 30, and it's just this absolute low point of leadership. David comes back to his city, Ziklag, to find it burned to the ground.
Total loss.
Everything is gone. And worse, his own men, his most loyal followers, they turn on him. They start talking about stoning him. So it's external failure plus internal mutiny.
The ultimate pressure cooker. But he doesn't just erupt. The text says he has this incredible recovery protocol.
And it's not vague at all. It's a clear process. First, he validates the grief. He and his men wept aloud until they had no strength left to weep.
So no toxic positivity.
None. You metabolize the grief. Second, he separates himself from the noise. He steps back from the mutiny instead of engaging it immediately. Third, he strengthens his core. He remembers his mission, his track record.
And then the most critical step, inquiry before action.
Yes. Regulation first. Then inquiry seeking counsel, getting data. And only then, action. That sequence is the hallmark of a steadfast leader. They know that decisions made in panic are almost always the wrong ones.
Your first job in a crisis is not to solve the problem.
It's to regulate the room. And yourself.
Which is such a contrast to the other crisis the sources identify, the Elijah complex, the burnout that comes after a huge success.
Absolutely. Elijah has just had this massive career-defining victory on Mount Carmel. High stress, high output. Then a single threat from Queen Jezebel sends him running for his life.
And exhaustion just completely distorts his reality.
It creates paranoia. He starts saying, I'm the only one left. His perception is totally skewed because he's just depleted.
And God's response is this divine rehab, as the sources call it.
It's amazing there's no theological lecture. The prescription is sleep.
Simple.
Then sustenance, warm bread and water, and then more sleep. Only after he's physically restored does this gentle, clarifying conversation happen. The lesson is just undeniable.
You can't be resilient if you're physically negligent.
Protecting your physical capacity is a strategic discipline.
I think every leader listening has felt that, where exhaustion makes a small problem feel like a catastrophe. So you need physical recovery, and you need to metabolize emotion, not suppress it.
Emotion is just data. It needs to be processed. And this is where vulnerability becomes a kind of superpower, dismantling that old strongman model.
The strongman who has to hide all weakness.
Right. But the sources point to examples like Jesus in Gethsemane, admitting this profound sorrow but remaining steadfast. He says he's overwhelmed to the point of death.
He doesn't hide it.
No. And that vulnerability builds trust. The strongman model says, never let them see you sweat. The steadfast model says, let them see you sweat so they know where to bring their own sweat.
You give permission for your team to step up.
It ignites collaboration. It doesn't weaken authority at all.
That's a huge shift. So once you're regulated and you've made the pivot, you get to the final stage, strategic rebuilding. And for this, the sources hold up Nehemiah as like the patron saint of recovery.
He really is. The book of Nehemiah is basically a project management manual for crisis leadership. Phase 1 is what they call the honest audit.
Right. When he gets to Jerusalem, he doesn't call a big town hall meeting.
No, he goes out at night in secret to inspect the broken down walls for himself.
You cannot fix what you refuse to face.
Yeah.
And optimism without data is just delusion.
Exactly. And that unvarnished data gave him the credibility for phase 2, the agile workflow. When the opposition started, Nehemiah didn't stop building to go fight. He integrated defense into the workflow.
That's the famous image of the hybrid leader. One hand on the sword to deal with threats, and the other on the trowel to keep building.
It is the ultimate lesson in focus amidst friction. He finished a project in 52 days that had been stuck for a century because his filter for every distraction was simply, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down.
He protected his attention, which is so hard to do. And that leads to the final challenge, right? Avoiding the Messiah complex.
The belief that you have to do it all yourself. This is the Jethro principle from Exodus 18. Jethro sees his son-in-law, Moses, just burning himself out, trying to judge every single dispute for millions of people.
And Jethro's warning is so stark. He says, the work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. You and these people will certainly wear yourselves out.
It's a twofold problem. The leader burns out, and the people wear out just waiting for a decision. The whole system becomes a bottleneck.
So the solution isn't just delegating tasks.
It's distributing the weight, creating a structure of capable leaders who can handle things.
So true legacy isn't what you build, it's who you build. You have to build a system that outlasts you.
It's the final act of a secure leader. They build other secure leaders. They distribute the weight so the whole organization becomes steadfast. This whole deep dive, it's taken us from that internal anchor of hypomone through strategic pivots, through recovery protocols. It's a demanding model of leadership, but it's also a freeing one. We need leaders who can look at a shipwreck and see a new mission field.
And that transformation really hinges on the strategic use of hope. And we have to be clear here, distinguishing between fragile optimism, which is the belief that circumstances will get better.
Which they might not.
They might not. And solid hope, or elpis in the Greek, which is a confident expectation based on unchanging character or purpose, no matter what the circumstances are. Optimism shatters. Hope gets stronger in the dark.
The sources drive this home with this really powerful image about all the turmoil we're seeing. They suggest it's not random.
Right. They argue that the world is going through a purposeful shaking. A shaking designed to separate what can be shaken, our reputation, our metrics, our strategies, from the unshakable. The constant chaos is revealing our foundation.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you, the listener. If all this shaking is designed to reveal what you're really standing on, what is being revealed in you right now, are you leading from what can be shaken? Or are you operating from a foundation that cannot? Because it's only when you lead from the unshakable that you, yourself, become truly steadfast.